process we're going to use to make sure we end up with square legs is fairly simple, but it takes a little bit of patience and you have to follow some directions. The first thing we need to do is find the grain and make sure it's going the same way on two adjacent sides. That's one side that's beside one another. Okay, so in this one I'm going to find my grain. It's going that way there. And back this way here. If I look over this way, it's coming back there. Okay, so once I know that I have two adjacent sides where my grain is going the same direction, okay, it's coming back towards me, I always put X's on the other side. That's just an indicator that the X is going to go towards the blades and go through the jointer first. But I want the two adjacent sides. Okay? We'll go through and we'll do that for the rest of our legs, and then we'll meet you at the jointer. We've got our two X's, and we spoke briefly before about making sure that you have your grain going the same direction on two adjacent sides. One other thing that we want to mention is you can't have any glue left on here. Okay? If you have any glue that's left on your joint from where we laminated together, we're going to have to go and scrape that off before we go to the jointer. Sometimes the glue can put nicks in the blades and we don't want that. Okay? So I want to show you that we need to have our two X's, okay? And what we want to do is have one X facing down against the table, okay? And the other X is going to face out away from the table. And we're actually going to do two different passes. The first one, we're going to simply hold down, nice even pressure. Make sure you keep nice even pressure on the outfeed table. That's what helps keeps us nice and straight. And then as we go through, my front hand, as long as it's above the guard, you'll be fine. The back hand, because I'm back here, I'm going to have a push stick that's handy, and I want to change over and use a push stick going over top of the jointer. I don't want to have my fingers anywhere close to the blades. So I'll joint the first side.
So as you can see, we are very carefully going over the jointer blades, making sure there's even pressure that's down against the table and against the back vents. And as we get close with the backhand going over the blades, you'll see me grab a push stick so that my hands are not directly above the blade. You'll also notice I tried to keep my feet as still as possible as I did this so that I didn't end up jerking around a whole bunch. Here's me making a mistake going to the camera. What I'm talking about right here is the machined edge, making a mark with my pencil. I make a little fish mark or a squiggly line so that you can tell that that side has been machined. And here I'm just talking about where the other X is and how it needs to now go against the bottom of the table, and the fish mark has to go against the fence. So I hold against the fence, nice even pressure, making sure to hold against the fence. Light pressure down, you don't want to lift yourself up. And then we can get the machine going here in a second, and we'll go through and make the second pass. Again, nice easy pressure against the fence, light pressure down. We're going to go, you try and keep our legs and not move a whole bunch. You want to move with it, but you're not jumping or moving or taking big steps, nice and easy. When you get over the blades, hold it still, grab your push stick, and you can push it the rest of the way through. And you should end up having two sides that are machined and perfectly 90 degrees to one another. Exactly what we're looking for, so we can move on to the next step in our project. You can see me pointing out the machined edges.
After we have both of our jointed edges, and you can see my mark over here, my mark over here, once we have both of our jointed edges, we want to orientate the saw. Make sure the blade is straight up and down or at the 0 degrees, okay? And the second thing we want to do is find out how we're going to orientate this piece of wood with the two marks that make sure they're 90 degrees, so that when we cut this down, we're going to cut it to about 2 millimeters over the actual dimensions, okay? So in this case, our actual dimensions are going to be about 45 millimeters. We're going to set it to about 47 millimeters. And what we're going to do is we're going to cut it down on two sides. But when we're done, we're going to have this mark and this mark still, okay? So the way we do that is one of them has to face down against the table saw, one's going to face against the fence, and we'll cut it. The other thing we have to do before we cut is make sure our blade is high enough, okay? I want about 5 teeth above the blade, okay? I can lock it down. And then once I cut the first side, we're going to flip it end for end, okay? And turn it so that we still have jointed edges down, jointed edges against the fence. It's fairly straightforward. We'll do the first couple of cuts here, and we're off to the races. Nice thing about this shop is we're outfitted with saw stops. So as any of the table saws the students work on have flush sensing technology, it lets the instructor sleep a little easier at night.
So now we're at the table saw and we're ready to trim it down. We're just taking a tiny little bit off of each of the two sides that are not machined already. So you can see I've gone through and I've pushed through the one side, and now when I flip this I go end for end and then I give it a turn. What we want is we still want to have our fish mark facing down against the table, and we still want the other one against the fence. That allows us to keep our leg at a perfect 90 degrees to all the sides. So each adjacent side is 90 degrees to the other ones. And I've gone through just to make sure that I've got everything off the leg there, and I now have a leg that is perfectly machined down to 47.
Next stop, we're over at the planer. We still have our initial marks from when we were on the jointer. Those marks are going to stay on here again, and each of these sides is going to face the table on the planer, and the cutter head on the top will machine the top side of the wood where the table saw marks are, and we should end up with 4 sides, all of which have been machined, all of which are square. So because we went to the table saw and trimmed this down so it was close to our initial size, we can go and we can actually set the jointer right to 45 millimeters, the size we want, and we can actually plane them right to size in one pass on each side. So it's 2 passes per leg because we have 2 sides that we need to plane. I'll get that set up and we'll go through there. So you're going to set the dial on the jointer, or on the planer, sorry, and make sure it is actually at 45 millimeters. There's 2 scales. This side over here is in inches, the other side over here is in centimeters and millimeters, okay? So I'm actually at 4.5 centimeters is 45 millimeters. So once again, I've gone through and I've found my grain, so I know which sides need to go in first. Arrows pointing away, X towards the blades. We've already set the height of the blades to where they need to be, and we're off to the races. I'll start the machine up and away we go. Second pass, separate side on the same leg. Voila, one perfectly square leg that is exactly the size in width and thickness that we wanted.